Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. So I want you to picture a ladder leaning up against a wall in your mind. And when you reach the top of that ladder, you will have achieved and attained all of your greatest goals and desires in life. But right now, your feet are on that second step and you're crouched down, holding on to the first step of that ladder with your hand as tightly as you can, and you will not let it go. Well, that first step represents all of the crap that you've been through in life. It represents the abuse, the ridicule, the failures, and the excuses that you have, whether those are about your race, your neighborhood, your education, your upbringing, your family's financial means, whatever it is, whatever reasons that you have that you've been holding on to that are responsible for how your life has turned out. Well, here's what you need to do. In order to reach the top of that ladder and attain your goals, I want you to go ahead and take that next step and climb that ladder. Well, you can't. If you're still holding on to that first step, it's impossible. And this is exactly how life works. So you're telling me that you want to become a millionaire, but you can't let go of the excuses that you keep making. You want your marriage to get better, and yet you're unwilling to forgive the mistakes that your spouse has made in the past. You want to end racism, and yet you're unwilling to let go of past events or transgressions that happened 200 or 300 years ago. So if you want to ascend to the next level, you have to be willing to let go of what has happened in the past. You have to let go of that first step on the ladder, and if you don't, it's impossible to reach the top. If you want to ascend to the top of the ladder, you have to let go of what's happened in the past. It's impossible to climb until you do so. And the guest you're going to hear from today is a perfect living example of this principle in action. At the age of 13, Ryan Blair was dealing with an abusive father who was addicted to drugs. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade and found new male role models, if you will, in a gang. He was arrested multiple times and destined for a life in prison or worse. And thankfully, Ryan was able to let go of all of the stuff that had happened to him in the past and ascend his ladder. In 2008, he took over a health and fitness company called ViSalus, and he took it from $6 million in debt to $150 million in revenue within 16 months. And by 2012, ViSalus was valued at more than $600 million. Today, you're going to learn how he did it and how he's dealt with additional challenges in his life, such as the day that he found out his son was autistic. With that being said, I want to apologize for the audio. I recorded this while on the road in Silicon Valley, and I learned the hard way that the microphone cover that goes over the mic is more than just a pretty, neat-looking piece for your microphone. It actually serves a purpose. Thankfully, Ryan does most of the talking, and you are in for one hell of a treat. So thank you so much. Without further ado, please help me welcome Ryan Blair. Hey, everybody. Mike Dillard here, and welcome back to A Self-Made Man. And today we're going to be talking to one of the youngest, most talented, and successful entrepreneurs that I've been following for the last couple of years. We got our start in very similar industries years and years ago. But Mr. Ryan Blair, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you making it today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being on.
Absolutely. So, I've been following you and your story and your work for a few years now, really since you launched your current business, ViSalus, which has become a huge monster, $600 million, business over the last couple of years. But you did not walk into this point in your life very easily or without some very significant challenges. And so for those who are uninitiated when it comes to your name and your story, would you be willing to go back to your childhood and bring us up to speed? Yeah.
I'm happy to. And for everyone on the phone, it's a privilege, to be talking to you here today. I love this podcast, and I am a self-made individual. I started off with a traditional middle-class family. My father was an engineer, and one of these individuals that worked in the aerospace industry. He'd read a book a day, so he was an avid reader. But on the other side of it, he had a lot of difficulties as a result of a tough experience in Vietnam and a tough growing up himself. At 11 years old, when I was 11 years old, he got addicted to drugs. And by the time I was 13 years old, he had disappeared. I'm the youngest of 6. And so naturally what happens when the father is removed from a household, a lot of times the household disintegrates, so to speak, as mine did. My brother went to prison. My other brother went to prison. My sister is still in and out of prison to this day. And then two of my other siblings, basically had to flee. And so as a result, it was just me and my mother who had picked up some bad habits of her own. And next thing you know, I'm on my own, and I became, what's called a ward of the court, which meant the government of the United States of America, or specifically California, were my foster parents. I was in and out of juvenile hall, in and out of trouble. Went to a continuation high school. My freshman year, in essence, had no high school education. And I got caught up with the wrong crowd. I was dealing drugs, dealing guns, involved in gangs. There's unspeakable crimes that occur in gang-related neighborhoods and gang-related affiliations. And so as a result, I saw a lot of trauma, but I learned a lot of things from that. I learned survival skills, learned an element of leadership. I learned how an organization works, particularly a volunteer organization. And a lot of those skills are applicable to entrepreneurship. When my mom started dating a real estate entrepreneur named Bob Hunt, I was about 17 years old. I was a rough kid, been in fights pretty much every day of the week. I was about 260 pounds at the time. And, I was a child going nowhere quickly. And he took me underneath his wing, and he had me doing, just labor jobs on his foreclosures, kicking people out, pulling out carpet, that type of stuff. But I got to see how entrepreneurship worked. And the moment that I saw it, I realized that would be my profession. I just had to figure out, the skills gap and the experience gap to get there. And that's what I've been working on ever since.
Well, where did that take you next? You've had the epiphany, the hunger and the desire, and the little seed has been planted at that point. And I can relate. I had nowhere near the kind of challenges that you had to go through, but I did have that moment of inspiration, which was in high school, coming back from waiting tables while all of my friends were out partying and having fun on the weekends. At midnight, smelling like food, would sit down to decompress, in front of the television, and there's nothing on at midnight except infomercials. But that was the inspiration and the seed that planted my desire to never really have a boss again. So once you had that, what was your very first, toe into it?
Well, so I started, I worked for my stepfather for a little bit, and he'd allow me to shadow invest. So let's say he bought a foreclosure that was a $100,000 house, and I'd saved up $100. He'd allow me to put my $100 into that foreclosure, and then we would sit down and talk about it and go over whether or not the house was a success or not. And so all of a sudden I had a vested interest in his investments, although it was nominal. He used it as an opportunity to teach me, the subject of equities and real estate and stocks. And so that was about a 2 to 3 year period where I really was such a student and just was listening to every word that he told me. And then from there, I decided I wanted to become an engineer myself. So I actually got a job at a growing startup that was in the satellite communication and software space. And I just fell in love with, bits and bytes, like I literally would work all night long. And my first company was inspired by that. It was called 24/7 Tech, which was in essence a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week tech support business that yours truly would show up to their house or their office, at 3 a.m., at 4 a.m. or whenever. And eventually I realized, and this was at a time for your listeners, I realized that, this was a time when Microsoft would crash every single day, 10 times a day. Servers would fail. I mean, this was prior to, the level of excellence that's involved in, some of the hardware and software that's present today. So I had a full-time job. I started 24/7 Tech, but then I realized 24/7 Tech wouldn't scale. So I started a company when I was 21 years old called Sky Pipeline. And by the time I was 24, Sky Pipeline, which was a wireless broadband communication provider, had sold to a company that later became Covad. And as a result, I had my first successful exit. It was a $25 million deal. And I was about 25 at the time. So, I basically took what he taught me as an entrepreneur and I applied it to something I was passionate about, which was software engineering and technology. And then from that point, I got a job. But while I had that job, I started working on my side business, which was 24/7 Tech, in order to leave that job someday and be off on my own, which I was after about 3 years of working at the software company I was speaking of.
So talk a little bit more about your exit, because you're 24, 25 years old. Most people who are that age don't even know what the word exit means.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand how that took place. Did the other company that acquired you approach you, or were you actively promoting it?
Yeah, no. So my company, I'd figured out sales, and this is what we talked earlier today before our interview. I figured out sales and marketing first, and my thesis was if I figure out that part, then I'll have enough money and time, and I can hire the right people to help me figure out the products. And so, I built such a sales engine that I quickly became number one. I started in Santa Barbara County. I became number one in Santa Barbara, then eventually Ventura, then eventually Los Angeles, then eventually I was number one in the entire United States. And it was because I perfected a sales engine. And my real subject matter expertise, when you look at all the brands I've been involved in, whether it be Elite Daily or Visalis or the Body by Vi 90-Day Challenge or Neon Energy Drink, it's really trying to understand the consumer mentality and mindset. And so as a result of me understanding that at Sky Pipeline, we ended up creating such a sales engine that the competition started approaching us. But I also had a great board of directors. Unfortunately, I didn't know what I didn't know about venture capital deals, because I did raise venture capital early on at Sky Pipeline. And as a result, when I sold the company for $25 million, my investors made 24 of the 25 million, and I did all the work. So I got a long story about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there you go, right? So There is an interesting story there. You just mentioned Gerard Adams and Elite Daily, who we interviewed on the show about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. So how did you play a role in that?
So this is magic, and this is why I write books, and this is why I'm so passionate about it. And this is actually why I'm writing my next book, or I just completed the writing of my next book, rather. Gerard had read my book. He bought it at a bookstore. He decided to start Elite Daily. It was like a Bible to him. As he describes it to me, he would walk around to all of his friends and have them read the book. He had all these notes taken in it. And then Elite Daily, one of their very first articles, I do keyword searches for certain brands I'm involved in. And one of those brands, not to sound like an egotistical maniac, one of those brands is Ryan Blair. And all of a sudden on my Google search or my Google alert pops up and it says Ryan Blair. And it says like the top 10 mentors of all time. And he's got like Jesus in there, Gandhi in there, Martin Luther King, and then he puts me in there. And I was like, what? Who are these people? They must be crazy. So I reached out to him. He told me about his business. I went and saw him in New York, did a proper interview, met the team, and then, basically wrote them one of their first checks to start the business. And then I advised Gerard through his exit and all that other good stuff. So Gerard's he and I are brothers. I'm on the board of his founders foundation. We co-invest in a lot of deals together. And just from writing a simple book and taking a simple act in 2011, now I not only have a great dear friend and a great series of exits and business opportunities, but that's basically how I met Gerard, is writing a book.
That's awesome. I learned years ago that the more you put out into the world, the more that comes back to you. Yeah, and the more opportunities are created. So that's awesome. Well, your biggest project over the last couple of years has been a company called Visalis. So how did that company start? And I know there's kind of an interesting backstory about that. And so walk everybody through that.
Yeah. And once again, not to plug my next book too much, but I talk a lot about what happened with that company because it's a very unique story. In fact, Visalis at one point in time was the fastest growing company in all of America, according to SEC filings. We were growing. We went from, in a nutshell, we started in 2005. I helped lead the acquisition of certain assets from a telecom company called the Free Network. They had invented and started working with a doctor named Dr. Michael Simon, who had invented a simple nutritional product that's a multivitamin and mineral. When I met Dr. Simon, I saw the same, analogy, so to speak, as when I was sending zeros and ones through the air, doing my broadband wireless business. I thought it was the same stuff to send nutrients into the cell. I saw it no different. Harnessing God's airwaves versus harnessing, the mitochondria of the cell, to me was exactly the same thing. And so when I worked with that scientist, I saw a magic there. I led the acquisition. I became an equal partner with the two co-founders who are really the experts in the direct selling network marketing piece of it. I, in fact, hated direct selling and network marketing because of some past poor experiences, but I saw the industry as being ripe for innovation. So, we leaned in. We ended up selling the company in 2008, right before the recession hit. So we just got lucky by a month because the deal would have been off. We sold in August 2008. In September, the whole Great Recession hit. The economy melts down. Nobody's doing deals. So I got out by just good fortune and good timing. And we sold it in a deal valued at $32 million, but it had an earnout component to it, which meant we got to get 8 times our EBITDA as a percentage of the remaining equity available over a period of what ended up being 5 years. And on the last year, in 2012, we did 97 million in EBITDA. So the total purchase price went from 32 million based on evaluation to 792.4 million in a period of 3 years.
Wow.
And so I don't think anybody's ever maximized an earnout like we did. And as a result of that, though, the public company that bought us, they couldn't afford to pay us. So,
I was just about to ask that.
yeah. So I made over $100 million on the deal myself and my two co-founders. And, we were happy with that. And they owed us another 248 million. And I know for everybody on the phone here, we're all self-made. So when I use these numbers, this is just me keeping score, right? Just think of me as any basketball player on the court talking about his best game. And I'll tell you about my worst game too. All I'm talking about is keeping score. And as a result, we were able to buy back the company last September and basically walk away from the deal that we did, with a whole lot more experience, a significant amount of wealth and an opportunity to do it right.
So one of the questions that I ask whenever I have an opportunity here with the right guest where it's appropriate is a subject matter that I personally am trying to learn as much as I can about, and that is scaling. Individuals with my background, much like our mutual friend Lewis Howes, have got the solo entrepreneur thing down and have been doing that very successfully for a decade, and am now in a position where my goal is to build, $100+ million business that requires scaling, building a team. What are some of the biggest pieces of advice that you have when it comes to that? And what are some of the biggest lessons that you've had to learn along the way?
Yeah, I've learned what not to do. So, we went from, give you guys an idea, 36 million and actually we went from 9 million in sales to 624 million in sales in less than 36 months. And so, the first thing that you do in that scenario is you have to start hiring because you can't answer the phones. You have to build a quality infrastructure. We launched 15 countries. Man, did I learn the hard way that scaling is not as easy as just math. There's a lot of emotion involved in it. There's a lot of, my good friend Tony Shea, I took my entire management team to go spend time with him in Vegas at his company Zappos. And, and one of the things that he told me that was just an amazing piece of wisdom, I didn't listen to it, of course, was growth covers a lot of mud. And so if I could go back in time, the things that I would do different now would be I would have slowed down hiring. I would have tried to spread my growth over several years. But as you guys all know, I was trying to maximize an earnout. So I was opposed to long-term growth because I didn't have a job at the end of 2012, or at least I didn't have one negotiated yet. So it was a bit of a conflict where my fiduciary responsibility was to maximize the earnout for my Visalis shareholders. But yet, by doing so, I was going to limit the long-term prospects of the business. And so as a result, we grew way too fast. Hired way too many people too fast. We overexpanded. We overspent like crazy. I mean, in 2012, I made 120 million in cash, 97 million in EBITDA. And so when you all of a sudden have that type of budget to play with, and that's the year we did 624 million, my operating budget was in the $200+ million range, right? So, the checks that I was writing, that doesn't include inventory and so forth. The checks that I was writing were big. And it seemed like the money was free because it came so fast. So I could tell I could write an entire book on what not to do when it comes to scaling a business. That's for sure.
If you were giving some advice to me, and you're like, okay, Mike, well, here would be the first thing that I would do.
Yeah. Number one is, and I learned this from Marissa Mayer, the ex-CEO or current CEO of Yahoo, but once the deal closes, probably won't be involved in the business anymore. But at Google, they negotiated each new recruit and each new hire, and they used what's called founders bucks. And, I got to give credit where credit's due. This was a Google initiative, and it's really designed just to reduce the amount of people you hire and to make sure that those hires are allocated where the company needs them the most. And so it treats employee hiring like a currency. And so the way I would look at employee hiring is just that. It is the most important decision you can make. If you get it right, you'll scale your business. If you get it wrong, you'll destroy it. And I advise a lot of entrepreneurs as a result of my venture capital fund, #1, where, I think the biggest problems that I deal with within my portfolio companies, Visalis being one of the largest, is simply that you have to treat your hiring very seriously and, hire slower than what anybody tells you, because you need to digest these people. You need to make sure you do so with intent regarding your culture. And you need to make sure that you onboard them, absorb them, get them working and productive. And then you're able to get them working, you hire more.
So, did you learn how to hire from someone specifically, or was it a book, or was this just trial and error?
It's trial and error, but I've always had a great board of directors. I've read every book on every subject I could find. Tony Shea at Zappos, a person that I've learned a lot from. I sent my executive team to his Insight School where they learn everything about their hiring methods. I interview great entrepreneurs like yourself, and I'll take any meeting I can with a great entrepreneur to learn, their best practices and their wisdom on the subject. And so, it's really an art and a science, and you got to master that. And I guess I've just spent my entire career trying to figure that out. I don't have it perfect, but I'm better today than I was, say, when I was in my early 30s.
Yeah, absolutely. And so during this big whirlwind, you came out with your first book, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain.
Yeah.
And you also had a documentary made about your story. So how did all of that come about?
One of the decisions that I made to sell, one of the people that I talked to that helped me make the decision to sell ViSalus was a coach named Coach John Wooden. For those of you not familiar, John Wooden was, the all-time winningest men's basketball head coach. He's written a number of books on the subject of leadership. He was as close to a saint as any human I've ever met in my life. When I sat down with him and I asked him, for advice on a couple occasions, and as a result of his mentorship, his perspective, and some of the other, great individuals that I've had the pleasure of being mentored by, I guess I could attribute, the results that I've gotten to the results that they've helped me and helped steer me with.
There's obviously, looking from the outside onto what you were doing, there was a very big push through the book and the video, from a personal brand perspective. What was your thought process around that?
Well, so Jay-Z has a quote that I love, and he says, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a business, man." And what that means is everything that he does is a business. His brand, his clothing, his apparel, the liquor he drinks, the cars that he drives, the restaurants that he frequents, right? Everything is a business for him. And so writing a book was my first step toward not only sharing my story, and I gave all the profits of Nothing to Lose to charity to help other children that are at risk find mentors just like I did. But so writing a book was my first step doing that. And then now writing my second book, Rock Bottom to Rockstar, is another step in that direction. Nothing to Lose did become a documentary. It's available on YouTube for free. I was able to negotiate a deal where I could get everybody in the world to watch this thing for free. So if you can support it, that'd be fantastic. And I did give all my proceeds to charity for Nothing to Lose. And, I'm really looking forward to a big launch of Rock Bottom to Rockstar coming out here in October.
So walk us through, from a marketer's eye, your launch plan around that book. We've interviewed, Tucker Max. We've interviewed Ryan Holiday on here as well. But you want to make that launch as big as it can be. What is your strategy to do that?
Yeah. One, to listen to the interviews that you've interviewed, Ryan Holiday and Tucker Max and so forth, because those two individuals are some of the best book marketers, and they know the best writers as well, I should say. For one, I think my strategy is to create the best product I possibly can, always. And, and I put all of my energy in the product. We did that in the documentary, and we've had a lot of great feedback as a result of that. I put that in Nothing to Lose. So, my belief system is if I write the best book on the planet, and you'll have to forgive me for wanting to have that level of a standard. I know it's never really possibly achievable, but certainly I wrote the best book that I could for my target audience. And as a result of that, then I go out there and I start sharing that story. I'm just starting to pick up the marketing piece of the book now, coming out in October. Everything from, new websites to a speaking tour to writing content for, writing gigs that I have lined up for the rest of the year, for example, with, I just signed on to write for LinkedIn, for example, and some others. So it's a very comprehensive process. I have a team of about 6 or 7 full-time people on the project. I'll expand that team extensively. And then I'll have a tour hitting the road where it'll be me plus probably 10 different, me in a big bus and probably 10 small buses out there hitting a number of stops to make sure that, we get the word out. But I also have a huge database through my ViSalus work and other work. So, I've got millions of people that have bought my products, read my books, connected with some of the touch points that I put out there. So now it's just really, the goal is to get that into the hands of the people that have already, know my brand and received my story positively, and to get them to actually share it. But you'll either on October 4th, you'll either pull up the list of top books and you'll see me on it, or you won't. I don't have a hell of a lot of control over it, in that we're in an election cycle and anything could happen in this day and age with with tragedy or unrest or election craziness. So we'll see if my stars align this time.
So how is this book and the subject matter going to differ from the first one?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I get that asked a lot. What's the difference between Nothing to Lose and Rock Bottom to Rockstar? Nothing to Lose was how I did it. It was a story of rags to riches, which, is a great story of inspiration, and people love to hear about that. And, it's sold in 12 countries and it still launches in new countries all around the world. So, I wanted to make sure Rock Bottom to Rockstar sold in conjunction with Nothing to Lose, meaning if a person bought Nothing to Lose, they have to go buy Rock Bottom to Rockstar, or vice versa. So I wanted to make sure that they were different books. Rock Bottom to Rockstar is about how you can do it too. It's not a rags to riches story. It's about going from rock bottom to rock star, because not everybody wants rags, or comes from rags, I should say, but everybody has had a rock bottom experience, and not everybody wants riches. Some people have a real problem with the life that I live. They think that I should give more money to charity or not have as many toys or whatever the case is. So some people just don't want to be rich. And that's their right to. So I just talk about going from rock bottom to rock star, and whether your definition of a rock star is, being the best stay-at-home mother you can be, being the best, weekend warrior father that you can be, or the best engineer or the best entrepreneur. I want to help people realize the foundation of their difficult times and their adversity, and realize that is what is indeed going to make them special in a marketplace where we have so many people that aren't actually taking action.
One of the things that I tell myself when I'm in one of those those down and out spots, which I had a big one a couple of years ago, is the struggle and the building back up process that you go through. I just tell myself, it's like, hey, this is going to be one of the best chapters in my story. And
a lot of people suppress that, Mike. A lot of times they suppress that. They don't embrace that. They try to bury that. But yeah, keep going. I mean, that is the outlook that you have to have.
Well, but it's also absolutely truth, and you're living proof of that. And which is that stories are what fascinate and attract and sell people on whatever it is your mission. So if you don't have that challenge to go through and overcome, and you don't have that story, it's not that interesting, right? So
yeah, well, and you will. Everybody has them, right? A breakup could be a rock bottom moment. And I have a lot of friends that they're telling me about their kids having addictions to, prescription drugs. That's a family's rock bottom moment. You have your health. You could, go to the doctor and he says you might not be able to make it. Could be a rock bottom moment. My mother was in a coma for 2 years. And for 2 years, I would have to go see her every single day in a coma with tubes in her brain and tracheotomy and feeding tubes. And just imagine, that's a rock bottom moment that lasted 2 years for me. I made the best of it. And that's really the difference of Nothing to Lose. None of that had happened. When I wrote Nothing to Lose, I originally wrote it in 2010, came out in 11, and then my company scales to $1 billion. I was a millionaire prior to that, but, all of a sudden now I'm touching, 9 figures plus, and I'm dealing with tragedy. I have a son with autism who's made amazing progress since the launch of Nothing to Lose. And I write a lot about that. And a lot of the things I've learned from him, and I applied to business. So in essence, I guess I want this book to change people's lives en masse. And so I believe, rock bottom is a foundation. I believe every one of us should be a rock star in our own right? In our own, whatever it is we want to be great at, we should have the tools. And Rock Bottom to Rockstar is about just that. It's the prescription that I use to get through these times. And, and then on the inverse side of it, sometimes it's what I should have done different when I did get through the times, and that I may have lived a little bit too much like a rock star from time to time.
Well, I've got a couple things I gotta throw in there. And one, Tony Robbins, I think, says it really, really well. And he says, you have to look at things from a perspective of they're not happening to you, they're happening for you. And so if you can reframe your challenges from that kind of context, it really turns it into an advantage, in a new light. The next piece there that I want to ask you about is, how has it been to balance your work life and ambition level with being a father? Because I am a single father myself of a 5-year-old right now, as well. So.
Yeah. It's, as a single father, I acknowledge you, and it's not easy. it's harder on the women that are single mothers than it is on the men. And I'm just blessed that I family together with my son's mother. I bought him a house as a crow flies. I live up in the Hollywood Hills. I bought him a house a mile away so that way I could get him over here and I could be at his house. He could be at mine. I do everything that I possibly can to make sure that, that when my son is 20 or 25, he looks back at the decisions that I made today and understands them. I can't spend much time worrying about how much he understands the decisions that I make today, because my number one goal as a single father is to make as much money as possible so he has the education he needs. With autism, that's very expensive and it's very time consuming. And I have to be heavily involved in his life as much as I can to help him cope through some of the learning challenges that he has. But inversely, I have to make sure that I have enough money in the bank so that way he can go to whatever schools are necessary, so that he can have assisted living as necessary. And that way he has the best chance at life that his magical body and brain have. And so it is a bit of a challenge, but, I love talking about this specifically because unfortunately there's just not a lot of fathers like yourself that are stepping up out there and saying, you know what, I'm a single dad and I'm going to be the best single dad I possibly can be. And to me, you're a rock star, because so many dads just abandon their kids. They turn their back on them. And they may be going through a tough time with their relationships, going through divorce or having had a child, outside of marriage or whatever the case is. And then they just disappear like my dad did. And the irony of it is I'm about to have a reunion with my father for the very first time. I haven't seen him since I was 13. Haven't even talked to him on the phone since I was 13. And I'm about to have that reunion with him for the very first time. And, a lot that brings up a lot of emotion and a lot of things that, that I just wish through my writing and through my work that a lot of men step up and they be stronger fathers than perhaps they are, because without a strong father in the household, that child doesn't have a chance, or doesn't certainly have a good chance.
How did the meeting that's coming up with your father come about?
Yeah, so I'm scripting it out, right? So I have to go through all kinds of different things about how this is going to work, because one, I'm trying to make sure that he meets his grandson for the first time. Two, I've forgiven him. Right? That's the thing is, when I was a kid and I got involved in trouble and involved in gangs, it was really because I had anger toward him, anger toward my mother, and anger toward a society that I felt had dropped me or let me go through such, crap without any support. And so I've since healed all that stuff and that's long gone. But I do have to make sure that I do it appropriately. I live in a house that he may be intimidated by when he walks in, and there's certain things that I have to kind of figure out how to do. But I imagine within the next week or two, I'll go through with it and I'll report back on how it went. I know it's going to be magical and beautiful, but I'm a bit of a planner and preparer, so I'm making sure that I do it right.
This is a very personal question, so you don't need to answer it.
Yeah.
But I think that your insight and your thought process, a glimpse at your thought process around this would prove very valuable to people, which is your son having autism. When you found that out, I assumed that's like, holy crap.
Yeah.
It's a tough gig. And I'm wondering what the thoughts were that you were having in your head when you're coming to grips with that reality, and how you're going to handle that, because that's one of those pivotal points in life where you can either like, this can be a bad thing that, we're victims of, or it is what it is, and how do we turn it into the best that we can make it, right?
Yeah. And the documentary, the reason why the documentary did so well was because it actually caught me in the car. I learned about my book debuting in 2011 on the New York Times list at number 3. And, that was a dream of mine. And then as I'm getting in the car, leaving a TechCrunch interview, the phone rings, and it's Casey, my son's mother. And we had him tested for his hearing because he wasn't responsive. He wasn't, I couldn't get his attention. He wasn't like normal kids. When he would throw a tantrum, and it didn't feel like a tantrum, it would be like banging your head against the wall and on the ground for hours, just in what looked like a seizure, as opposed to, say, a child being unruly or lacking, discipline. So I knew there was something wrong. I didn't know what. And I got the word that it was autism. I didn't know what autism was. I never spent any time. I didn't know how it was created. All you want as a father is to have a healthy child, right? That's all you want, right? I don't care if he's a rocket scientist or he's happy as a school teacher or whatever in between. I just wanted him healthy. And unfortunately, he wasn't. I've since leaned in on this subject, and I treated it like a life and death situation, because I knew that early on, the more help that I got him, the better chance he would have at becoming a normal child. And so I threw everything I possibly could at it. Thank God for his mother, Casey. She didn't have to work, because I was able to provide for her to make sure that he got into the right schools, the right education, and so forth. But, it was one of my weakest moments. I remember like breaking down, crying as though I lost a relative, because that was the last thing I wanted to hear. Like I said, that rock bottom moment, though, that turned into something very strong. And now I use that moment and I talk about that moment. I share my son's autism because I want other families to help get through their moments too. So, once again, it goes right back to the theme. You got to take what makes you weak and turn it into what makes you strong. That was certainly one of my weakest moments, but from that, I've found a lot of strength.
Yeah, and that's the key. It's happened. The big decision here is what you're going to do about it and how you're going to see it. So that's amazing. Moving to something a little bit lighter. You mentioned a few minutes ago. Well, two things real quick. One, you've used the term lean in 3 or 4 times now over the last 40 minutes. And I'm curious if that was something that you got from Sheryl Sandberg's book.
Yeah, I haven't. So I haven't started reading Lean In. I haven't actually completed the book as of yet. I have learned a fair amount from it. I also happen to have some friends of hers that I get to talk to on occasion and learn a lot from her. I always am seeking to learn from people like Sheryl, whether it be reading her book or navigating my to a that she's a part of. I have huge admiration for her, and certainly huge admiration for what they've been able to do at Facebook. But even more importantly, her losing her husband, the CEO of SurveyMonkey, was a tragedy for her. And I just have. She's one of the strongest women I've ever seen walk the face of the earth, and I'm such a huge fan of her and a huge fan of her work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And getting into the last piece that you mentioned earlier, after you've had the success that you've had, from a lifestyle perspective, you and I happen to share a very mutual admiration for nice cars. So, you've owned some amazing vehicles, and if you would talk a little bit about where your passion for cars came from and what your favorite has been so far.
Yeah, that's great. So, I guess I got to tell you, Uber has disrupted my car collection because, one, I'll never drink and drive. And every time I have to go out, it tends to be a social affair of sorts. So I have to go to this dinner or that dinner. I mean, when the more successful you get, all you basically do in life is meet people. That is it. Like you just, every day of the week. So my favorite car in my collection is my 1964 Lincoln Continental convertible with suicide doors.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. For those people that know my story, I started my career in a 1978 Toyota Corolla station wagon with wood paneling on the sides. Growing up in, a heavily Latin influenced neighborhood, the 64 Lincoln was the dream car. That was the first car that my big expensive purchase. I'd had a Mercedes-Benz 2004 SL500 prior to that. That was a car I leased. When I went broke, I had to give it up. And I decided that next time around, I was going to pay cash for cars and I was going to, use them as a reward system. So I reward myself when I close a deal or I do something I'm proud of with a car. The things that I do aren't always equivalent of say, hey, let's go buy a car. So it happens few and far between. On the inverse side of the Lincoln, which I rebuilt, I put maybe 150,000 plus into this thing, working out every little detail to make it as perfect for me as possible. I then bought a 458 Italiana, and I've since, bought and experimented with a lot of different cars. But, to me, they're just a reward system. I love good engineering. In Southern California, we're in cars a lot. So, it is an element of comfort as well. And an element of, if I'm having a bad day, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, I'll go for a drive and I'll just realize how blessed I am. In America, we are blessed right now. All around you is the greatest wealth creation event in the history of humanity. And a lot of times we just get caught up in crap and we don't see it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. My favorite car that I've ever owned is a 458 Spider.
Yeah,
and
I love that car.
The engine, the noise, the experience is just absolutely unbelievable. And, for me, nice cars, it's not about ego. It's not about showing off. It is about appreciating the fact that, God has blessed these wickedly smart people to be able to build such an amazing machine.
Yeah,
and
that spider is amazing. Just when you open up the engine on it, it is an inspiration. I know that car very well.
It turns, and most people don't get this, but I take it to the grocery store and I'm like, look, this could be a really boring chore that is an interruption in my day.
Yeah.
Or it can be a life-altering experience, just depending upon the vehicle that you're going to make that trip in.
Yeah, and, it is. You got to look for things like cars that it's better than looking at the money in the bank, right? You're earning nothing on your money in the bank. And what my stepfather always told me, and I attempt to do, and I don't always do this, but I attempt to, is buy assets that are going to appreciate.
Yeah.
So I don't mind buying a 458 Spider with 500 miles on it, and I get the best price. And if I do decide to sell that in a year, maybe I've lost a little bit, but I haven't lost a lot. If I put it in a stock, who the hell knows what's going to happen?
It's something that most people don't realize, and I didn't either until I purchased that 458. But a Ferrari can be it can be the least expensive car you've ever owned.
Yep. I just try to look at it over a period of time, right? So if I'm going to own it for 3 years, what's my cost on that capital?
Yeah.
What would I have invested that in otherwise, and what would my yield be? If I put it in, say, short-term muni bonds or things like that. So, you got to do the math, but, as an entrepreneur, you're a brand, and, and you should enjoy the success of your brand, as far as I see.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here right now in the Hollywood Hills looking out at $1 billion worth of real estate in my purview. And, and a number of the pieces of real estate are homes that I own that I've rented out to other people, and I'm making great money on those things. Right. So, my house that I live in right now is paid for by all the other houses that I own on the block that are getting me yield. Yeah. So I just ways offset my liabilities and turn them into either assets or turn them into business expenses.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And your house is gorgeous. So,
thank you.
We've got the book coming out, Rock Bottom to Rockstar, October 4th. You've got an amazing Instagram channel. You're always posting pictures of the house, of you and your son, and the cars, and just your life in general. But where can people go to connect with you and to get the early line in on that book?
Yeah, so just go to ryanblair.com and you'll have all the links to there. We are going to have some book packages available to certain people. And right now, the way it looks is if people have a large organization, they're able to buy several books for their organization. They can actually get some time with me, whether it be on Skype or FaceTime, or if we can work it out in person, we can. Or they can actually donate my time to a charity that helps with at-risk youth or helps with autism, my two favorite causes. So right now, there's a lot of my friends, like, for example, Dan Gilbert, the CEO of Quicken, and some others that are just going to basically make me go out there and give back to charity and serve as a result of the launch of this book. So go to ryanblair.com and you'll hear all the details about it.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you for your leadership and your mentorship and everything that you're doing for entrepreneurs out there. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
It's been awesome to finally get to connect and hear your story and learn.
And when I'm in Austin, Mike, I want to drive the 458 and I want a place to stay.
well, the place to stay is a done deal. Unfortunately, the 458. Here's what I can do for you. The 458 is gone.
Okay, got it. We'll rent one.
The 488 shows up in November.
Perfect.
And I don't know if you've ever raced before, but I do have my professional racing license now, so we can go to COTA and tear up the track. So.
I have not. And that's actually on my live list. Is with my Ferrari. Unfortunately, I live in the hills, and I do drive it aggressively, but I haven't got it up to top speed yet. So maybe we'll plan an Austin trip.
Cool. Well, if you have an interest, I'll follow up with you.
Yeah, for sure.
The best time to come down is make sure you come down in October for the F1 race.
Awesome. If you could just shoot me, any date and time, I'll see if I can make it available. And I do plan to get there for South by Southwest.
Awesome, brother. Cool. Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you once again for your time today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.